Welcome back to the deep dive. You know that effect where you shine a really bright spotlight on someone and their shadow just becomes huge behind them? Well, today we're going to take a good hard look into those shadows, the blind spots, the operational gaps, the psychological voids that even really smart, successful startup CEOs can miss. Why? Because they're so focused on that spotlight, on their own wins. Our mission, and we've got some great sources here provided by one of you, our listeners, is to unpack five five key pitfalls specifically for these high growth startup leaders. And the analysis we're diving into, it's from a PR and crisis management expert, Deborah DeYoung of Tip Top PR. She's seen it all firsthand, when the charismatic leader kind of loses the plot. We're not just talking simple financial mistakes here, not at all. We're looking at something deeper, this psychological disconnect, right? With that high speed chase for funding, for media hits, for market buzz, it just completely hides the basic operational reality of the company. Okay, let's get into this blueprint for failure.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is that DeYoung isn't just listing mistakes. She's outlining predictable traps. And these traps, they're fundamentally rooted in the very things, that huge personal belief, that amazing energy that got the company off the ground initially. It's a paradox, really. The traits that make you a great founder can sometimes make you a pretty terrible CEO down the line. So we need to unpack not just what these five blind spots are, but also, why they are so hard to see. Structurally, psychologically hard to spot when you're the one in charge, signing checks, doing the interviews. The focus just naturally pulls outward, doesn't it? Especially when things seem to be going well.
That structural view is so important because the first big category of these pitfalls, it's all about that external focus versus internal health. We start with what the source calls blind spot 3, being famous. This insight is incredibly sharp, I thought. It defines the startup not as like an organizational goal in itself, but more as a personal vehicle. It points out that CEOs, especially the co-founders, often see the company just as the means to achieve their own goals. Things like, getting into certain social circles, personal fame, maybe just raw power. Success gets measured by like their Twitter followers, not the P&L statement.
Right. And that misalignment, that profound misalignment of ambition, that's the engine that really drives, I think, the most critical mistake here, which is blind spot 1. Ignoring signals. I mean, if your personal success metric is all about external validation, raising the next round, getting that magazine cover, creating viral buzz, then naturally your operational energy gets pulled away from the, let's face it, boring internal red flags.
Yeah.
And the source is really specific about the kinds of signals that get sacrificed for fame. It's not just abstract production issues. Think about it. Maybe the top line revenue growth looks fantastic. Great story for the next funding round, right?
Mm-hmm.
But buried in the details, the customer acquisition cost, the TS, just skyrocketing, totally unsustainable. That signal ignored because the vanity metric revenue, that's what makes headlines.
And the cost of focusing outside is paid inside, isn't it? The source really hammers this home. If you're always chasing the headline, you just inevitably miss the messy reality of running the business day to day, like that toxic work culture signal the source mentions. That's a big one. If the CEO is always on the road giving keynotes, looking famous, they might completely miss that their lead engineer quit. Then 3 senior devs follow. Suddenly, product deadlines are slipping by months. All that energy spent on the external buzz, it means turning a blind eye, maybe even subconsciously, to the necessary and sometimes painful truth of the company's internal health.
Exactly. The organization becomes almost like a stage prop for the CEO's personal brand, rather than, a well-oiled machine built for actual profit and sustainability. If the company is just a tool for your celebrity, then the moment an internal crisis threatens, say, your media appearance schedule, that crisis gets downplayed or just ignored. Which raises a really tough question. If the leader defines success primarily as personal status, can they ever truly prioritize the organization's long-term health over their own image?
That's a heavy one. And it sets us up perfectly for the next shift, moving from that external validation piece to internal self-perception, what the CEO actually believes their job is. And that brings us neatly to blind spot 2. Concentrating on innovation, not on business, our sources highlight this common thing where founders, they stay stuck in their original identity. They're the inventor, the coder, the visionary, the innovator. They kind of resist, or maybe just fail to make, the transition into being a business leader. And this identity crisis, it dictates everything, how they spend time, where the resources go. So you get this intense, almost obsessive focus on product development. Which is exciting, sure, but it sidelines the critical stuff, the necessary stuff. Frankly, the less glamorous stuff like scalable sales processes or deep market analysis or building a robust business strategy.
Yeah, and the result, often, is a company that kind of never really graduates past the concept stage.
Yep.
Even if the concept itself is pure genius, they might have the most beautiful functional prototype you've ever seen, but without someone really leading the business side, they never figure out how to turn that prototype into something that pays for itself, something sustainable.
Right.
They're focused on building the better mousetrap, but they completely forget to build the road to the market.
And this focus on pure intellectual output, it often leads us straight into the fifth trap, which is blind spot 5, becoming the know-it-all.
This one's a really interesting paradox you see with highly intelligent founders. Logically, right, they surround themselves with highly educated people, MBAs, PhDs, top consultants. Sounds great for scaling up.
Okay, but the source says this can create an intellectual monoculture. How does that make them lose touch with the ground level reality?
Well, it creates this dangerous distance from what you might call street smarts, practical experience. The CEO and their sort of cabinet of very smart people, they can start to believe that intelligence alone, abstract analysis, can solve every single problem. The trap, as DeYoung puts it, is they start rejecting critical hands-on knowledge, especially in areas like production or logistics or supply chain. The messy stuff, you can picture it, right? The CEO surrounded by consultants with a perfect efficiency model on a spreadsheet. Then the factory floor manager, maybe with 30 years experience, says, look, that model fails every Tuesday because the trucks only bring those parts on Wednesdays.
Oh, okay.
And the CEO dismisses it, calls it anecdotal, not rigorous enough. They trust the intellectual model over the practical, messy reality. But success needs both. It needs diverse experience, diverse knowledge. High intellect, ironically, can breed ignorance of just fundamental practical execution.
That's really compelling. That intellectual certainty, it reinforces the idea that the CEO doesn't need to listen to anyone outside that echo chamber. The very ability to generalize and theorize, which is part of what makes them smart, is exactly what can disconnect them from the specifics, the nuances you absolutely need for scaling. Okay, now we have to talk about the most behavioral trap of the 5, the one that really seems to accelerate all the others. Let's tackle the personality shift, blind spot 4. Self-confidence turning into arrogance. Now, when a startup's just getting going, the source is clear. The CEO needs certain traits: creativity, passion, sure, a deep sense of responsibility, and definitely a willingness to take action, to take calculated risks. These are the things that cut through red tape, through inertia.
Absolutely. They're the essential force of nature at the beginning. But here's the slippery slope, as the source calls it. It shows how these action-driven, creative, confident visionaries, they often transition. They slide into becoming pathologically overconfident, then arrogant, and finally autocratic. That unwavering conviction that launched the company becomes the psychological wall that limits its future growth.
What's the tipping point then? What makes it slip?
I think it boils down to the relationship with risk and with dissent. The confident founder takes responsible risks, yes, but they also listen to feedback about those risks. They learn from mistakes. The arrogant CEO, they start to punish anyone who points out a risk, anyone who suggests a different way. They go from trusting their gut to believing their word is the only truth, and then they stop hiring for talent, for challenge. They start hiring for compliance, for people who just say yes.
Wow. And if you trace the consequences, you see this terrible chain reaction. The autocratic leader, blinded by their own certainty and arrogance, that's blind spot 4 and 5 right there, they will actively filter out or just reject those internal red flags we talked about blind spot 1. Why? Because seeing a signal of failure means admitting they might be wrong, a personal imperfection.
Exactly.
And they become shielded by their own certainty and also by that desperate need for external validation, blind spot 3. All of this makes it basically impossible for them to make that crucial shift from being just an innovator to being a humble business leader, blind spot 2. Someone who gets that you need solid processes guided by objective data, not just gut feel.
Yeah, the slide from confidence to autocracy just slams the door shut on all the feedback loops the company desperately needs to survive and grow.
It's a closed system.
So, okay, let's bring this all together. What does this mean for you listening right now? We've mapped out these 5 interconnected, really powerful blind spots: ignoring signals, focusing on innovation over the actual business strategy, chasing personal fame, letting confidence decay into arrogance, and developing that know-it-all syndrome. Now, Dieber de Jong's conclusion, it's not meant to be pessimistic. It's more like a guide to staying power, to longevity. Being a startup CEO is, without doubt, challenging, exciting, hugely rewarding. But to be truly successful, especially beyond that initial launch phase, you have to be intensely aware of this cycle of potential self-sabotage. That awareness, the source really stresses this, that is what helps ensure real sustainable prosperity.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, maybe zoom out a bit. These 5 blind spots, they all point to a common fundamental tension. It's something every founder has to navigate throughout the life of their company. It's that constant push and pull between the visionary ego, that almost irrational self-belief you need to even start something new, and the organizational humility you need to sustain it, to scale it. You need the confidence to take off, absolutely. But you also need the humility to trust the air traffic controller, trust the data if you actually want to land the plane safely.
That's a perfect analogy. Pilot needing ground control. Love that. And okay, here's one last provocative thought for you to chew on, building on what these sources imply. If the entire startup, right from the beginning, is viewed by the CEO primarily as just a tool, a vehicle for achieving their personal fame and power, does that built-in conflict of interest, the personal ambition versus the company's health, does that make ignoring those crucial, less glamorous business signals not just a mistake, but maybe inevitable? Something for you to ponder as you connect the dots in your own work, in your own field.